and welcome to episode number 72 of the Knitting Teaspoon podcast. I'm Liesbeth, your host, and this is a podcast which is all about knitting, sewing, spinning, weaving, basically all of the fiber crafts that I feel like. And it's been a long time since I've last podcasted. A lot has happened here since last episode. Of course, if you've watched last episode, you will know that I was full on wedding prep when we last saw each other. And I have to say, a few days before our wedding, things went completely haywire. But, well, let's start with good news. We did get married. This is my wedding ring. Yeah. In that sense, it's fine. Or it ended up all fine, I guess. But, you guys, it's been an emotional roller coaster. So, first let me just show you my wedding dress, because I had promised to show you. And, it's a bit weird considering there's no body in here to support it, but here is my dress, and I can try and explain to you what the dress is like while holding it up. But I think you will get a better view of it if I just show you the pictures of our wedding day, which have finally arrived last weekend, so I can finally show you. But there is a sewn dress, which is basically the only part that you haven't seen if you're a regular viewer of this podcast. And it's mostly covered by this top. It's a full circle skirt below the top, and there is a maternity belly part underneath it. So, inside the dress. So that's basically it. I've tried to put on the dress as I have worn it, but I'm not sure to what extent that shows up pretty well. I think in the end I used over 11,000 beads on this dress, which is probably why it took me so long to make it. But I was really pleased to have it finished. And it was finished, I think, about 1.5 weeks before we got married. And then I was just working on the socks. So, got back from picking up the socks. Here are the socks that I wore on my wedding day, because I felt like if anyone is going to see my legs underneath my skirts, then I want white socks, and I basically threw out all but 2 pairs of socks that I haven't knit myself. So I have these hiking socks still left, but none of them are white, and I felt like I needed some white socks for under my wedding dress. So here they are. They are a slightly modified version of a pattern by Bitta Mikkelborg, which is a Norwegian designer, and I've knit patterns from her before. These are in a book called Strømper, Strikke, hele, året, something like knitting the year round in sock. And on the front cover there's, or the back cover I think, there's this male version of a traditional sock in Norway, which I've wanted to knit for the longest time. I decided to knit the female version anyway. So this is the female festive sock theme that's in the book. The patterns are all in Norwegian, so luckily they're mostly based on charts, and I've just knit my usual toes and modified the stitch count slightly, because I don't know how tight Norwegians knit, but I've knit this at double zeros, or at least the foot bit, and I still have less stitches than they have, and they think you're supposed to knit it on size 2 or 3s or something. I don't know. I mean, either they like very baggy socks, or they have a lot bigger feet than me, or they just knit really, really tight, or any combination of those factors. I don't know. Anyway, I did finish the ribbing at 1 a.m. on the night of our wedding, which is a bit late. But I will tell you a bit more about why this was so late. I was planning on just finishing these socks at whatever length they were on the Wednesday morning. After my local knit group, I was just going to knit the ribbing and then just leave it at whatever length they were. But they were very close to being full knee-high length, so I decided to continue a little longer on it. And then on Wednesday we got married on a Friday. There was a sudden emergency in which I got admitted to the hospital because our baby started to show signs that it wanted to be born early. And at not quite 33 weeks pregnant, that is an emergency. Babies are not supposed to be born that early, and it has been a very shocking experience, let me tell you. So at I think around 3 o'clock or something in the afternoon, suddenly there were these very alarming signs that the baby was coming, and we went to the hospital, and there was a lot of research, and they did checkups on the baby's health and everything. And at about 7 p.m. in the evening, these things they take a while. They had the results back from several types of research, and that showed that the baby was actually planning on arriving early, and they would have to give me medication to subdue the contractions that I had at that moment, and those meds needed to be administered by intravenous for at least 48 hours, and then they also needed to give some medication to speed up the lung ripening of the baby, because babies that are born so much prematurely, they typically have problems breathing. So I had to stay in a hospital for at least 48 hours at the moment that I was planning on getting married in about 40 hours. So bye-bye wedding plans, it seemed like. So that evening, apart from obviously being very shocked at the possibility that our baby was possibly going to suffer from being born prematurely and all the consequences that could have, we also got to cancel all of our wedding guests. I'm sorry, I needed to take a little break here. It's still a bit overwhelming to talk about, but in the end it turned out we were incredibly lucky. My at that point still fiance and me started calling people, so I called my sister, who I knew was already working on making our cake, because it was just 2 days before we were supposed to get married, and she did a wonderful job on that. And my fiance, he called the official register, so the guy who was supposed to marry us, and we were incredibly lucky because this guy, he has a grandchild that was born prematurely, so he understood all of the stress that we were under, and typically changing a wedding location is a process that takes weeks to get all the official documents for it done, but he was so incredibly helpful, as were the medical staff in the hospital. They gave us a meeting room in the hospital where we could get married anyway in a hospital, provided that my health would allow me to, sit up and say yes, basically, to the one important question on your wedding. So I got married in a wheelchair in a hospital. Hooked up to some intravenous solution to help our baby not be born prematurely. And it saddens me that I have had to cancel all of my friends for the wedding and my grandparents, because I couldn't be sure enough that the wedding would still be on.
But yeah, in the end it turned out that we could get married, but it was a very, very small occasion, much smaller than we had anticipated, very different from what we had planned, but still a very special day to us. And we felt so much gratitude towards everyone who's helped us have a wonderful day, even though I was completely dazed with all the medications and everything, and just the shock basically of what was happening. And yeah, apparently while you're drugged you can still say yes, and it's still valid, and we got married, so that's what counts, I guess. And now the baby is officially my husband's as well, so that was kind of important that we got married first. I mean, there's other legal options for recognizing a father, but we were planning on doing that in one go by getting married. Anyway, so because I was in the hospital and I wasn't really doing much and I hadn't anything else to do suddenly except for staying very quiet and hope that the contractions would stop, I decided to knit the socks slightly longer than I otherwise would have, and started ribbing probably a little bit too late, and I couldn't sleep anyway, so because of all the beeping noises of all the medical devices in the hospital. And I finished the cuffs slightly short. I will have to redo them at some point because I'm planning on using these socks on other occasions as well. So there we were in the hospital, just married, on the Friday afternoon, and I was completely exhausted. I mean, we were never planning on having a big ceremony anyway, because I already knew that I was going to be pregnant at the time, but yeah, it definitely got to a very much light version of it. After about 1.5 to 2 hours of party, which was the ceremony, and then a very short thing with just my parents and my parents-in-law, and well, all of the brothers and sisters and their partners, and the people who we had appointed as witnesses. Just those people. We had a very nice day, and I was completely exhausted after just 1.5 to 2 hours maybe. I was pretty happy that there was a hospital bed waiting for me because I desperately needed to sleep. But after a while, of course, I woke up, and with my wedding socks finished, I didn't have any other knitting with me. Luckily, my boyfriend, or my husband, I still need to get used to the terminology. But luckily my husband insisted when we went to the first checkup in the hospital that I bring my knitting with me, because he knows I get anxious if I don't have anything to knit. But after the wedding I didn't have anything to knit on. So I was very happy that some of my friends had sent a lot of presents to the room that we had in the hospital, and just as a wedding present I got a lot of skeins of yarn from my local yarn store where I obviously frequent, and my brain was not in a mood to knit anything complicated, so I started knitting with the 5 colors that just happened to be packed together, because I wasn't in any mood to do any planning for knitting. And I knit another newborn vertebrae for our baby, and this is Lana Grossa, I believe, Cool Wool Baby. So it's a very fine merino yarn, just a fingering weight, and I got 3 sets of 5 skeins, and I just picked the first one and started knitting with all of those colors and striped them, and I think it kind of looks cute. One of the sets was very pink, so that was a conscious decision not to knit with those colors because we still don't know if we are having a boy or a girl. So yeah, and I just needed an easy pattern, and I started knitting on this, and yeah, I finished it since I was already back home, I think, or going home by the time that I finished this, because on Friday evening the doctors decided that I needed the medication for at least a little while longer, because it took some time for their contractions to really stop, and they don't want you to stop those medications in the evening because labor typically starts in the evening or at night, and they wanted to see me safely through the night. So they prolonged the medications until the Saturday morning. And then on Saturday morning they decided that I needed to stay another day for observation. So yeah, we got to stay in the hospital for another day. But luckily I did have yarn. I did have knitting with me to get me through the time there. And yeah, so there's another newborn vertebrae, which I just happened to have the pattern downloaded on my tablet already, so I wasn't in any mood to try anything difficult. And then once I got home, I also knit with the leftovers of the yarn, knit a matching hat. I think someone recommended a baby pattern for a baby hat pattern to me, but I can't. I couldn't find it at the moment. I think it's the barley hat that was recommended to me, but I just knit this instead, based on the stitch count that I already measured on the other newborn vertebrae. I was also quite happy that I did not decide to start knitting preemie stuff for my own baby, because apparently labor was not coming and our baby turns out to have a pretty large head. But when I got home, I had strict instructions to keep very quiet and not to do anything too exerting, because I might still start labor prematurely, and well, we still didn't want our baby to arrive early. They considered 37 weeks the milestone from which it's regarded safe to have a baby, and I was at just over 33 at that point. So yeah, I still had to do basically nothing for another 4 weeks. Luckily, sitting down and knitting counts as doing basically nothing, so I could work on some baby projects at home, and I decided to start knitting some diaper covers, and here they are. This is the Leo diaper cover, I believe, a pattern from I have no clue who the designer's name is, but I will put it on the screen for you. The yarn that I've used is Strømper. I've knit with their yarn before, and you may recognize the yarn that I've used because I've knit this pattern actually twice. Here's the same pattern, but this is like the open piece, and this one is folded together. They are the same size. So it's the Leo diaper cover, and this yarn feels a bit weird, and that's because I've been using lanolin to wet proof it. Apparently that's nice for baby skins. I don't know, I have no experience with it yet, as I do not have a baby yet, luckily. That is, by now it would be allowed for the baby to be born, as I'm 38.5 weeks pregnant at the moment. Anyway, so I knit these. Both are a DK weight BFL yarn from Stripy. I believe it's called Vertebrae, and this is the peacock bird colorway, and this is something like unicorn tails black. And both of them, with both of the yarns, I also managed to knit some tiny pants, which is also a diaper cover pattern. Also don't know the designer's name for this one, but I will look it up and put it on the screen for you guys so that you can read. Yeah,
this fit out of one skein each. So yeah, I have 4 diaper covers, and then my mother-in-law also knit me a few, so I have a few more that are lanolized and a bit sticky now. I'm not really convinced that I like this type of diaper cover, but then again, if you never try, then you'll never know, and it seems a very natural way to deal with stuff. So those were very quick projects, and my brain kind of needed that because I was still pretty much dazed and pretty much shocked with everything that had happened, and yeah. I just really desperately needed to knit something for the baby. There's another baby knit that I've started and finished since we got married, and this is a traveling bag. So it's supposed to be a kind of coat that you can use in a car seat. That's why it has this belt loop in it here, and it is basically knit from a modified version of a thing that I knit years ago. I made the colorwork pattern for the bear faces myself, and the rest is inspired on a Swedish pattern. And I did a modified version of a pattern that originally also comes with a hat attached to it, but I didn't want an attached hat because I felt like the baby's not always gonna want to have a hat on, and I better have a separate hat like this to keep the baby's head warm, and that it can move around without like looking inside the top part of this type of bag. So there it is, and I really like it. And a friend of mine has been so kind to pick up these buttons for me, because I was, well, not in a state that I could travel to any kind of yarn shop or anything. So yeah, it was very nice of her to pick up those buttons and just bring them to my house. Another thing that I finished for our baby that is coming pretty soon, hopefully, is these socks. I have knit several pairs of socks, I think in the summer or autumn time, and while the socks themselves, they were pretty much finished, I had never finished the ribbons to tie around the ankles of the baby, to make sure that the socks will stay on. So they had these gaps already in the socks, but this ribbon I just twisted some of the leftover yarn and made a lot of ribbons for the socks. So that's finished now too. And then let's just get into the last knitting project that I'm working on. It's not yet finished. I am knitting a blanket for our baby, and obviously I'm mid-row because I'm always mid-row, but this, well, it's kind of difficult not to be mid-row on because the rows are pretty long. Anyway, I'm knitting a blanket that is Entrelac, and on this side you can see that it's open, so it's a flat piece. I'm knitting it back and forth. That is the collar sections always go from this side to, well, all the way around. You can see that I'm here now, almost ready to start a new block, and between all of the white blocks of the row below, I knit into this direction, and then with the white I knit another set of blocks going in the opposite direction. So I have basically one colored end on each side of the blanket, and one white tail on each end of the blanket, except that the rows are so long that sometimes I need to attach a new skein, and that leaves me some more ends. Yeah, and I'm using some yarn, Anil Malmedy, which I've used previously, although I may not have used it during the
podcast. No, I do think I have, because I've knit a baby blanket out of this yarn for my cousin as well. A few years ago, or 1.5 years ago, I don't know. It's been a while. Anyway, yeah, I just picked up the rainbow colors and the white and started knitting, and I'm enjoying it. It's about halfway done. I think I'm going through the rainbow twice. Entrelac has this really stretchy property, so whereas it might not look like half a blanket size like this, it can stretch out pretty much. So I think twice the rainbow will definitely be long enough for this blanket. Also, in the width-wise direction, it definitely has some size already. So that's all of the knitting content. Then let's get into the next project that I've been working on. When I got back from the hospital, I also, the week after our wedding, I started to set up for a weaving project. And yeah, here it is. It's a baby blanket that I've woven out of some lamb's wool, Norwegian lamb's wool, that I have purchased years ago when I visited the Oslo Strikke Festival, and I was intending this yarn to become a sweater for myself, but it's been lingering in my stash for so long, and I never got around to actually knitting the sweater or even designing the sweater that I was going to design for it. So I decided to just leave it at that and use some stash to make a blanket. And well, it was a very successful attempt, because I think I've used 10 skeins out of my stash to make this blanket. It is a project that was double weave, so if you think this is a bit of a weird dip in the middle, yes, you're right, it's a bit of a weird dip here. That's because my skills at double weaving are definitely not perfect. This is kind of the edge of the work, so I've woven it kind of folded double like this. So my loom is about this width, and by using 2 heddles and a set of pickup sticks, you can actually weave a piece that is twice as wide as your weaving loom, but it's a bit more tedious, as I found out. And also, usually I like to beat down and push onto, well, the frame. I have it sit on my belly. That's not a good idea at the moment. So yeah, it was interesting to weave this, and but it was nice. And after finishing the weaving bit, I did crochet the ends together. So there was actually a part that was 3 times as long as this gray bit that I've woven, and I folded it double twice so that the edges are tucked under. I've also bathed it and given it a very thorough scrubbing so that the ends would be felted a little bit so that it wouldn't come undone so easily. Then I've crocheted it together. Then I've crocheted some edges around the entire blanket in all of the colors that are in the blanket, so the gray, the light blue, and the darker blue. You can see the entire warp was this gray color, and then I striped the 2 different blues. There's no reason for having the darker blue stripes being wider than the lighter blue stripes, other than I had more of the dark blue yarn than I had of the light blue, and I don't know why, because I don't know what I was thinking when I bought this yarn, but probably that I had a lot more time to design a sweater out of it and knit it for myself, but I never got around to that. So I'm glad that this yarn has finally found a purpose as a baby blanket, or possibly a blanket for on our couch, because well, baby blankets and couch blankets are pretty much equal in size, and it's very nice and light lamb's wool, so I'm happy to have this weaving project finished, even though I still know that I have a lot to learn in terms of weaving a little bit neater. Then there has been some sewing as well. Well, first of all, I'm wearing a dress that I've sewn myself. Ironically, I've just sewn it last weekend, and it's a maternity dress, which is a bit weird to sew yourself maternity clothes when you're already 38 weeks pregnant, so less than 2 weeks before your due date. But I had cut this fabric and the fabric for another dress, which I'm not sure if I've shown you, at around Christmas time. So I had all the pieces already cut out, and I'm still running into a little bit of a problem when doing laundry, or especially when I'm postponing laundry a little bit too long. I don't have that many clothes that fit me right now. So yeah, I needed another dress, and now I have another dress. And the other dress I finished around Christmas. I'm not sure if I've shown you this dress already or not. Haven't gone back to check it, but I have sewn pretty much the same dress in this slot fabric as well. Both of these are Agnes Maternity Agnes dresses, which is a pattern by Tilly and the Buttons, and I've sewn it before. Although at that point I modified it slightly to accommodate a slightly less huge belly, but at this point I definitely needed a huge belly part that is included in the pattern, because well, at this point I'm very close to having a baby. And the other Maternity Agnes I knit out of, or sewn out of this fabric, which you may recognize, but now I've also made some cute, adorable baby pants from a pattern that I got from a magazine. So some friends of mine, they have given me a huge stash of magazines with baby and children's patterns, and yeah, these pants were in there. They have the little feet attached, so there's a little foot. Yeah, and it was a quick and easy sew, and it fit out of the leftovers of that dress, so that was nice. I did try some pattern matching, and it worked out quite well, I'd say. Like, well, obviously the squid does not continue quite nicely here, but I feel like the stripes match up quite nicely here, and also on the back side. So yeah, that was nice. No, although on the back side, apparently my pattern matching went haywire a little bit. Anyway, so yeah, there's been some sewing, there's been weaving, there's been a lot of knitting, and well, a lot of emotional stuff going on. And I hope to catch up with you guys sooner next time, but unfortunately I still don't know when that's going to be, and I don't dare make any promises now, because I mean, my baby could be born any day now, between now and 2.5 weeks, because if it's not there in 2.5 weeks, they're going to to get it. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say to you for now. And well, thank you so much for coming back after this long of a hiatus. Now you will know that there's been enough going on for me to, well, at least for me, justify being on hiatus for a while. But it's good to be back. Anyway, so I hope you guys have a lovely time, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!